Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is great to have you here. Today, we are shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
We aren't dissecting a Silicon Valley business book or, looking at the latest neuroscience paper. We are going back, way back, to the source code of human storytelling. We are tackling Introduction to Drama, specifically focusing on Unit 1 of the British and European drama course.
It sounds so academic when you put it like that, Unit 1. But what we are really talking about, I think, is the machinery of empathy, the blueprint for a human connection.
That's exactly why I wanted to do this.
Mhm.
When I first looked at the source material, I'll be honest, I had a bit of a flashback to high school English class. Reading Shakespeare aloud really badly while the rest of the class sort of snoozed.
Oh, we've all been there. The painful monotone to be or not to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as I started digging into this course material, I realized we are not just talking about old books. This isn't literary archaeology. We are talking about a living, breathing art form.
Precisely. And that's probably the first and most important mental shift we need to make for this deep dive. Drama is not literature. I mean, it is literature, of course, but that is only half the story. If you treat a play script like you treat a novel, you're fundamentally missing the point.
The source text makes this huge distinction right out of the gate. It frames drama as this bridge, a bridge between the solitary act of reading and the communal act of witnessing something together.
Witnessing is the perfect word for it because drama, unlike a novel, requires a body, it requires a physical space, it requires a specific slice of time.
Okay, so here's the roadmap for today. We are going to unpack the DNA of drama, what it actually is, where it comes from. Then we are going to sort of open up the hood and look at the engine, the key elements like plot, character, and dialogue. After that, we'll look at the different masks drama wears, tragedy, comedy, the absurd. And finally, we're going to stage a bit of a friendly battle between two great traditions, the British way versus the European way of doing things.
And for you, the listener, the so what here is massive. We are discussing mimesis. That's the classical term for the imitation of life. Drama is basically the laboratory where we can test drive human conflict without getting hurt. By understanding how a play is built, you start to see the strings, the structures behind your own daily interactions.
It's like seeing the code behind the matrix.
Right.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. The etymology. I found this fascinating. The source material brings up the Greek origin of the word drama.
It's one of those derivations that once you hear it, it just changes how you see the entire field. The word comes from the Greek verb dran.
And I think most people, myself included, would assume that means something like to pretend or to speak or to tell a story.
That's the logical assumption, isn't it? But it's none of those. Dran means to do or to act.
To do, not to say, to do. That seems so simple on the surface. But when you think about it, it's actually a huge constraint, isn't it?
It is a massive defining constraint. Think about a novel for a second. In a novel, the author can stop the action for 20, 30 pages to describe the entire history of a French village, or what a character is thinking about their third-grade teacher, or the exact way the sunlight is hitting a particular leaf on a tree. Absolutely nothing is happening in that moment, but it can be beautiful and profound.
You do that on a stage.
You just can't. In drama, if nobody is doing anything, either physically moving or verbally jousting, the play dies. It just stops dead in the water.
So drama is always in the present tense. It's always the now.
It is the absolute tyranny of the present moment. It's all action. Even when a character is just sitting still, if they are speaking, they are usually trying to do something to the other person on stage. They're trying to seduce them or threaten them or convince them or forgive them. It is always active.
This brings us to a concept the source text calls the dual existence of drama. This is the part where I really started to understand why reading plays can be so difficult for some people.
Ah, yes. The hybrid nature of the beast. That is the dual existence. On one hand, you have the text, the script, the physical object. You can go to a bookstore and buy a copy of Hamlet, take it home, and read it in your bathtub. And in that sense, yes, it's literature. It's a book.
But that's not its final form. That's not the destination.
No, not at all. That's just the recipe. Or, to use a better analogy from the source material, it's the blueprint for a building. If you look at a blueprint, you can get a really good idea of the house. You can see where the walls go, you can imagine the rooms, you can appreciate the design, but you cannot live in a blueprint. You can't host a dinner party inside a drawing.
Right. You have to build it. You need bricks and mortar.
And in drama, the building is the performance. The script is fundamentally incomplete until it is enacted, embodied by human beings in a specific space in front of other human beings.
This creates a really interesting tension that the text points out. A novel is, for the most part, finished when the author puts down the pen.
Yeah.
But a play is never really finished, is it?
Never. And that's what makes it both terrifying and incredibly exciting. Every single time you perform a play, it's a new creation. The audience is different, which changes the energy in the room. The actors feel different that night. A line gets a laugh that never got one before. It's ephemeral. It exists for 2 hours in a shared space, and then it vanishes forever. All you have is the memory of it.
The source material also grounds this in a deep history. It's not like people just decided to start putting on plays for money one day.
Yeah.
This goes way back to ritual.
Oh, deep, deep ritual. The text highlights ancient Greece and India specifically, but you see it across many ancient cultures. Drama didn't begin as entertainment. It began as a way to communicate with the divine, to make sense of the cosmos. It was communal. The whole village or city would gather together for these ceremonies.
So it's functional. It was about social cohesion, about keeping the tribe together.
It was about survival, really. Understanding the gods, understanding the cycle of the seasons, the harvest, understanding death. It was how a community processed its biggest fears and hopes. Over centuries, it evolved from pure religious ritual into what Aristotle famously called mimesis, the imitation of life. It became a way for the community to hold up a mirror to itself.
Speaking of looking in the mirror, we need to touch on the two main theoretical frameworks mentioned in this unit. We have Aristotle, who is, the grandfather of all of this, but then the source throws a bit of a curveball with a much more modern thinker, Mikhail Bakhtin.
Ah, Bakhtin. He's fascinating. A Russian philosopher and literary critic from the 20th century. And he brings up this incredibly useful concept he calls dialogism.
Okay, dialogism. It sounds incredibly academic, so let's try to break that down.
It's actually not as complicated as it sounds. So think about a classic novel written by, let's say, Charles Dickens or Jane Austen. You have a lot of wonderful characters, but ultimately there is a narrator. There's a God voice. That voice is guiding you, telling you this character is fundamentally good or this situation is deeply unjust. The author is shaping your judgment every step of the way.
You are being led by the hand, emotionally and morally.
Exactly. Bakhtin argues that drama is different. He says it's polyphonic. That just means many-voiced. The moment the curtain goes up on a play, the author disappears. They're gone. You just have, say, 5 people on stage, and each of them has their own completely valid worldview. The hero gives a speech, and you think, wow, he's right. But then the villain gives a speech, and you think, he kind of has a point, too.
And there's no narrator to jump in and say, actually, don't listen to the villain, he's wrong.
Yeah. Right. There's no safety net. The audience has to sit there, right in the middle of this collision of different voices and perspectives, and negotiate the truth for themselves. That is the dialogic nature of drama. It's a democracy of ideas fighting for dominance.
That makes the audience much more active than I had realized. We are not just passive consumers. We are the judge and jury.
You have to be. The play demands it of you.
Okay, so we know what drama is. It's action. It's a blueprint waiting to be built. It's a collision of voices. Now I want to get into segment 2, the anatomy of a play. The source material lists these elements of drama, and it gives a really important warning. Don't think of them as spare parts in a bucket. They are more like organs in a living body.
That's a great way to put it. You can't just remove the heart or the lungs and expect the patient to survive. They all depend on each other.
Let's start with the big one, the spine, the plot. Aristotle calls this mythos. And he says something that I think feels quite controversial by modern standards. He says the plot is the soul of tragedy.
Which is a huge statement. It directly implies that the plot, the sequence of events, is more important than the characters who experience those events.
Which just feels wrong to me. I mean, I feel like I watch movies and TV shows for the characters. I care about them.
And we absolutely do in the modern era. We are completely obsessed with psychology. But for Aristotle, drama was about the architectonic arrangement of incidents. It was about the structural integrity of the story. If the structure wasn't sound, the whole play would just collapse, no matter how interesting the characters were.
This is where we get that famous pyramid shape, right?
Yeah.
The one we all learned in school, Freytag's pyramid.
Exactly. It's the classic heartbeat of a story. It's so ingrained in us we don't even notice it anymore. You start with exposition. Who are these people? Where are we? What's the status quo? Then the inciting incident, the pebble tossed into the pond that disrupts everything. Then you get the rising action. The tension tightens and tightens. The stakes get higher.
And then the top of the pyramid, the climax.
The breaking point. The moment of no return. The big confrontation. After that, you have the falling action, where we see the immediate consequences of the climax. And finally, the denouement.
Denouement was a French word, right? What does it literally mean? I've never known.
It means the untying. Like you're untying a complicated knot. All the complications from the plot are smoothed out, the loose ends are tied up, and a new normal, a new status quo is established.
When that structure is so deeply satisfying, it feels orderly. It feels like how we want life to be. Clear cause and effect. A neat conclusion. But the source text points out that modern drama often takes a sledgehammer to this beautiful pyramid.
It smashes it to bits, completely. Modern and postmodern plots are very often fragmented or nonlinear or cyclical. Think of a film like Pulp Fiction. It deliberately jumps around in time. Or think of a play like Beckett's Waiting for Godot, where the end of Act 2 is almost identical to the end of Act 1. It's a loop.
Why do they do that? Is it just to be difficult or pretentious?
I don't think so. I think it's a philosophical choice. It's about reflecting a different view of reality. If you believe the world is fundamentally logical, ordered, and meaningful, you write a linear cause and effect plot. But if you believe the world is chaotic, fragmented, random, and maybe even meaningless, well, then you write a fragmented, cyclical plot. The form has to match the philosophy.
That leads us perfectly into the next element. Character or ethos. You mentioned that for Aristotle, character was secondary to plot, but today it feels absolutely primary.
It has evolved immensely. In the Greek tradition, characters were often types. You had the noble king, the loyal messenger, the blind prophet. They needed to be consistent. If a character was brave, they were always brave. They needed to have a clear moral integrity.
But if I look at modern drama, I'm thinking of someone like Blanche Dubois from A Streetcar Named Desire. She is anything but consistent. She's a liar, but he's also a victim. She's a snob, but she's also incredibly fragile. She's a complete and utter mess.
And that's the modern shift in a nutshell. We moved from these clear moral types to deep psychological complexity. We crave ambiguity. We love the anti-hero. But there is a deeper layer here that the source material highlights, something totally unique to the medium of drama itself.
This is the phrase that just stopped me in my tracks when I was reading. It said the character is negotiated on the actor's body.
It's a profound and powerful concept, isn't it?
The word negotiated, it implies a struggle, a back and forth.
It is a struggle. It's a collaboration. Think about it. In a novel, Blanche Dubois is exactly who the author, Tennessee Williams, describes on the page. She exists purely in the reader's imagination, shaped by those words. But in drama, the character of Blanche Dubois doesn't really exist until a living, breathing human being steps into that role on a stage.
So the actor isn't just a hollow vessel pouring out the author's words.
Yeah. Not at all. The actor brings their own physicality, their voice, their age, their height, their race, their gender presentation, their own life experiences. If you cast a 25-year-old man to play the traditionally elderly King Lear, you aren't just changing the look of the character, you are fundamentally changing the meaning of the play. The audience reads the actor's body just as much as they hear the author's words.
So the character is this third thing that's created in the space between the text and the actor.
Exactly. It's a hybrid. It's a ghost brought to life. And that's why you can see the same play 5 times with 5 different casts and honestly feel like you've seen 5 completely different plays.
Okay, let's talk about the fuel for all of this. Dialogue.
The primary medium of meaning in theater. In a novel, a lot of meaning can come from internal monologue or lush description. In a play, it's almost entirely carried by what people say to each other. So dialogue has to do triple duty. It has to reveal who the characters are, it has to advance the plot, and it has to create the unique rhythm and atmosphere of the scene.
But the source material brings up a really counterintuitive point. It talks about the importance of silence.
Ah, yes. The famous Pinter pause. It's named after the British playwright Harold Pinter, who was a master of using silence.
Explain that to me. How is silence a form of dialogue? It's the absence of dialogue.
Well, in modern theater especially, what isn't said is often far more important than what is said. Let's take a simple example. If I ask you, did you steal the money? And you immediately fire back, no, that's one beat. But if I ask you, did you steal the money? And there is a 5-second silence, you look away, you shift your feet, and then you say no.
Then I definitely stole the money.
Or you're deeply offended by the question. Or you're protecting the person who actually did steal it. The point is, the silence is not empty. It's heavy. It's active. It's crackling with unspoken meaning. It's where the subtext lives.
Subtext. That's the stuff happening underneath the words.
Right. In bad drama, characters say exactly what they feel all the time. I am very sad because you broke up with me yesterday. In good drama, a character might just look at their ex and say, could you pass the salt? But the way they say it, the subtext is, I am sad because you broke up with me. The audience understands the real meaning.
Let's move on to setting. This seems straightforward, it's just the place where the story happens. But the source contrasts traditional setting with absurdist setting in a really interesting way.
Traditional drama, especially in the 19th century, was obsessed with realism. Ibsen, for example. If the play was set in a Norwegian drawing room in 1880, then by God, the stage looked exactly like a Norwegian drawing room in 1880. Real furniture, real doors, real wallpaper. The setting's job was to contextualize the action, to ground it in a specific time and place.
And the absurdists came along and just threw all of that out.
They stripped it bare. The most famous example, of course, is Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. The setting is described in the script in just 5 words. A country road, a tree, evening. That's it, no more.
Why strip it all down like that?
Because they aren't interested in London 1890 or New York 1950. They are interested in the human condition, always and everywhere. By removing all the specific details of time and place, the setting becomes universal. More than that, it becomes a reflection of the character's internal state. If the characters feel empty, alienated, and lost, then the stage itself is empty, alienating, and lost.
And then we have the element of spectacle. The Greek word is opsis.
Poor spectacle. Aristotle really, really hated it.
He was a bit of a snub about special effects, wasn't he?
He really was. He considered it the least artistic of all the elements. He believed that if a play had to rely on flashy costumes, big moving set pieces, or, a mechanical crane to lower the gods onto the stage, this famous deus ex machina, then it was cheating. He thought all the power and emotion should come from the plot and the language alone.
But the source notes, correctly I think, that this is a very Western, very literary-focused bias.
Yeah. It's a huge bias. If you look at non-Western traditions like Indian classical theater or Japanese kabuki theater, spectacle is absolutely central. The intricate movement, the symbolic costumes, the elaborate makeup, that is the text. It's where the meaning is carried. And honestly, even in the West, let's be real, we love spectacle. Look at a Broadway musical like Wicked or The Phantom of the Opera. We go to see the chandelier fall. We love it.
Finally, let's talk about the engine of the entire machine. Conflict.
Without conflict, there is no drama. Period. End of story. If everyone agrees and everyone is happy, the scene is over. There's nowhere to go.
The source outlines the main types. Internal, like a character wrestling with a decision. Interpersonal, 2 characters at odds. And external, a character versus society or nature. But I'm more interested in the resolution part.
This goes right back to the structure we were talking about. Traditional drama, for the most part, seeks catharsis. That's Aristotle's term for the purging or cleansing of emotion. The conflict is resolved, the good guys win, or the tragic hero dies, and we, the audience, feel a sense of release and closure.
But modern drama often denies us that satisfaction. It just leaves you hanging.
Deliberately so. It often leaves the central conflict unresolved to force the audience to take the problem home with them. If the play neatly solves the issue of, say, social injustice, then you can go home and sleep soundly. But if the play presents the problem and then just ends without a solution, it forces you to keep thinking about it. The play becomes a question, not an answer.
That is a perfect segue into our next section, segment 3, the 4 masks. We are talking about the major forms or genres that drama takes. We have tragedy, comedy, tragicomedy, and the strange one, the theater of the absurd. Let's start with the heavy one, tragedy.
The goal of classical tragedy is to evoke the emotions of pity and fear, which leads to that catharsis we just mentioned. We watch a great figure fall from a great height, and in doing so, we process those terrifying emotions from a safe distance.
And there's a very specific recipe for the classic tragic hero.
A very specific one, yes. First, they must be of noble birth. A king, a queen, a great general like Oedipus or Hamlet.
Why noble? Why can't a plumber be a tragic hero in the classical sense?
Because in the classical worldview, the fall has to be a long, long way down to have a societal impact. If a king falls, the entire kingdom shakes. If a plumber has a bad day, it's sad for him and his family. But it's not a cosmic, earth-shattering event. The stakes are lower.
So the hero has a flaw. The source calls it hamartia.
Yes. And this is a word that often gets oversimplified and mistranslated as just tragic flaw, like pride or ambition. But it's more subtle than that. It really means missing the mark, like an archer missing a target. It's often an error in judgment or an intellectual mistake as much as a moral failing.
And then there's peripeteia. That's the turning point.
That's the reversal of fortune. The moment when everything that was going right suddenly starts to go horribly wrong, usually because of the hero's hamartia.
And finally, Moira.
Fate. The overarching sense in Greek tragedy that this downfall is inevitable. Oedipus can run all the way to Thebes, but he cannot escape the prophecy that he will kill his father and marry his mother. It's inescapable.
But the source material rightly points out that we don't really write tragedies about kings and prophecies anymore. We write tragedies about ordinary individuals.
This is the great democratization of tragedy. This is the core argument of the American playwright Arthur Miller with his masterpiece, Death of a Salesman. He argued passionately that the common man is just as apt a subject for tragedy as any king.
Willy Loman, the ultimate common man.
Exactly. Willy Loman isn't brought down by the angry gods or an ancient prophecy. He is brought down by the relentless pressures of the American economic system. He's brought down by his own delusions about the American dream.
So the source of the tragedy shifts from an external cosmic fate to an internal social or ideological crisis.
Which, in a way, makes it much more immediate and terrifying for a modern audience.
Wow.
We don't really worry about Zeus striking us down with a thunderbolt. We do worry about losing our jobs, about not being able to pay the mortgage, about feeling obsolete.
Okay, let's flip the mask over. Comedy.
If tragedy is about death and isolation, comedy is about life and integration. The word itself comes from the Greek komos, which was a kind of wild, drunken revel or festival.
The source says the goal of comedy is to expose social follies and ultimately to affirm communal norms.
That's a great summary. Comedy often acts as a kind of social corrective. We laugh at the miser or the hypocrite or the pompous intellectual or the person who takes themselves way too seriously. And by laughing at them, the community is implicitly saying, don't be like that. That's not how we behave.
And the ending is absolutely crucial. Tragedies end in death and despair. Comedies end in
Marriage. Almost always, traditionally. Think of Shakespeare's comedies. They almost all end with a flurry of weddings. A Midsummer Night's Dream, you have chaos in the woods, people falling in love with the wrong person, a man turning into a donkey. But in the end, everyone gets paired up and married.
Why marriage specifically?
Because marriage represents the restoration of social order after the chaos. It promises the future. It promises children, continuity, the survival of the community. Tragedy says, this is the end. Comedy says, and so it continues.
But of course, real life isn't usually just one or the other. It's a messy mix. And that's where tragicomedy comes in.
Exactly. The source calls this a blend, which is right. It offers a vision of life that is neither wholly despairing nor fully optimistic. It lives in that gray area in between.
There's a wonderful quote here from a Renaissance playwright, John Fletcher. He defines tragicomedy as a play that wants deaths, which is enough to make it no tragedy, yet brings some near it.
That is a brilliant and concise definition. It brushes up against death, it lets you feel the chill of the darkness, but then it pulls back at the last second. Shakespeare's late play, The Winter's Tale, is the perfect example. The first half is a brutal, heart-wrenching tragedy, insane jealousy, the perceived death of a queen, an abandoned baby. The second half, 16 years later, is a light, pastoral comedy with shepherds and clowns, and in the final scene, miraculously, a statue of the dead queen comes back to life.
It's that feeling of the laugh that hurts, or the tear that has a smile in it.
That's Anton Chekhov, the Russian master. He is the king of tragicomedy. His plays are filled with characters who are suffering deeply from loneliness, from boredom, from unfulfilled dreams, but they are suffering in ways that are also kind of pathetic and ridiculous. You don't know whether to cry for them or laugh at their absurdity.
Yeah.
Which I think feels very true to real life.
And then we have the fourth mask, the one that sort of breaks the mold, the theater of the absurd.
This is the most radical shift in the entire history of Western drama. And to understand it, you absolutely have to look at the historical context. This emerged in Europe in the late 1940s and 1950s, right after World War II.
So we have just witnessed the Holocaust. We've seen the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The world had gone literally mad. The old structures of meaning that had held Western civilization together for centuries, faith in God, faith in reason, faith in progress, they all seemed like cruel jokes. How could you write a neat, logical play with a tidy beginning, middle, and end when the world itself had just demonstrated that it was utterly chaotic and meaningless?
So the core philosophy behind it is existentialism.
Yes, the ideas of thinkers like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre, the idea that human beings are born into a universe that is fundamentally irrational and devoid of any inherent purpose or meaning. We are strangers in a strange land.
And so the theater reflects that. It becomes anti-theater.
Exactly. If the world makes no sense, then the play shouldn't make any sense either. The dialogue becomes repetitive, nonsensical, full of cliches that have lost their meaning. The structure becomes circular with no real progress. The characters are lost and confused.
Waiting for Godot is the titan here, of course. Two tramps, Vladimir and Estragon waiting by a single tree for a mysterious man named Godot.
Who never, ever comes.
And as one of them says, nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes. It's awful.
But that waiting is the central action of the play. It dramatizes the fundamental feeling of being human in a post-religious world. We're all just waiting. Waiting for meaning, waiting for salvation, waiting for something to happen. And we fill the terrifying silence with silly games and pointless conversation just to prove that we exist.
It sounds incredibly depressing when you describe it like that, but the strange thing is it's actually funny.
It's hilarious. It's pure vaudeville. It's slapstick comedy like Laurel and Hardy. Because the absurdists realize something profound. When you strip away all the grand narratives of meaning, all you have left is the sheer naked absurdity of the human condition. And maybe laughter is the only sane, rational response to an irrational universe.
Wow. Okay. We have covered the DNA, the anatomy, and the forms. Now, for our final segment, we need to look at geography. Segment 4. A Tale of Two Traditions. British versus European drama.
This is a really fascinating divergence, and obviously the source text warns us, and it's a good warning. These aren't rigid, airtight boxes. There is a huge amount of crossover and influence, but there are distinct vibes or general tendencies that are very helpful for analysis.
Let's start with the home team for this course, the British tradition. How would you characterize it?
If I had to summarize the British tradition in one word, it would be text, or maybe language.
It's very literary, word-focused.
It is deeply logocentric. That means centered on the word, on logic, on rhetoric. This goes all the way back to Shakespeare. The Elizabethan theaters, like the Globe, were basically bare stages. They were amphitheaters. They didn't have elaborate, realistic sets. They didn't have sophisticated lighting effects. What did they have? They had the astonishing power of poetic language.
So in this tradition, the playwright is king.
The playwright is king. The text is sacred. In the British tradition, generally speaking, the director and the actors are there to serve the text, to illuminate it, to bring it to life as faithfully as possible. The focus is on psychological realism, deep character development, and moral inquiry, all explored through finely crafted dialogue.
The source also mentions the angry young men of the 1950s. John Osborne's play, Look Back in Anger.
That was a revolutionary moment. They dragged British theater into the modern world. They put the lives of the working class on the main stage for the first time. They famously put an ironing board, a real ironing board, on stage at the Royal Court Theatre. But notice, it was still realism. It was still people in a room talking, arguing, dissecting their problems. It was still about digging deep into the character's psychology through powerful, realistic dialogue. The form was traditional, even if the content was radical.
Okay, now let's cross the English Channel. Let's talk about the European tradition. The source uses words like rupture, experimentation, and concept.
That's a perfect summary. The continental European tradition has historically been much more willing to break the rules of reality. They are often less interested in holding a mirror up to nature and more interested in smashing the mirror to see what the pieces look like. It's more visual, more philosophical, more avant-garde.
Who are the key players here that define this tradition?
Well, you have to start with the Germans, specifically Bertolt Brecht. He absolutely hated the idea that the audience should get emotionally lost in a play.
He didn't want us to cry with the characters.
He thought it was a trap. He believed that if you were crying, you weren't thinking. He wanted what he called epic theater, and to achieve it, he used the Verfremdungseffekt.
The alienation effect, or making strange effect.
Right. He would do everything possible to constantly remind the audience that they were in a theater watching a play. He'd have actors break character and address the audience directly. He would shine harsh, bright white lights on the stage so you couldn't pretend it was a dream. He would hang placards with statistics or political slogans. He was constantly poking the audience in the ribs, saying, "Wake up. This is not real. This is a construction. Think about the politics of this situation."
That is the polar opposite of the immersive psychological realism of the British tradition.
It's a complete rejection of it. And then in France, you had Antonin Artaud and his idea for a theater of cruelty.
Which sounds absolutely terrifying. Like a horror movie.
It was meant to be intense, but not in a gory way. Artaud thought Western theater was dead because it was too obsessed with words and psychology. He wanted to bypass the rational intellect and assault the audience's nervous system directly. He wanted a theater of screams, of ritualistic gestures, of overwhelming sound and flashing lights. He wanted to shock the audience into a kind of spiritual and sensory awakening.
So to try and synthesize this culture war, if you will, the British tradition tends to lean towards the eye. It's about text, debate, psychology, language, The European tradition tends to lean towards the eye. It's about spectacle, concept, image, and philosophy.
And also structure. The British tend to value continuity and evolution. The Europeans, especially in the 20th century, tended to value rupture and revolution.
Continuity versus rupture. That's a really great, clear way to frame the difference.
And of course, today, in our globalized world, these traditions have merged and blurred. You have British directors who are very conceptual and use a lot of video, and you have European directors who come to London to do very faithful productions of Shakespeare. But understanding those deep-seated roots helps you see why a particular production feels the way it does.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. We've gone from the definition of Dran to do all the way to the silence of Pinter. From the tragic fall of King to the absurd waiting of two tramps by a tree.
It is a lot to take in. It's an entire universe of thought and practice.
So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask the big question. Why does any of this matter to the listener? Most of the people listening to this deep dive are not actors. They're not playwrights or directors. Why should they care about the negotiation of character on the actor's body or Freytag's pyramid?
Because, as the source material so brilliantly implies, drama is not just something you go to watch. It is a fundamental framework for understanding all human interaction. We are all, in a sense, performing all the time.
We are. I'm not sure I am right now.
Think about it. You have a work mask you put on when you talk to your boss. You have a different character that you play when you're with your oldest friends. You have another one for your family. You navigate conflict every single day, big and small. You are constantly negotiating who you are based on the setting you find yourself in.
So we are all actors, and life is our stage. It's the old cliche.
It's a cliche because it's true. We are all operating within scripts. Sometimes they're personal scripts, but often they are scripts written by our society. Go to school, get a good job, get married, buy a house, have kids. That's a plot. That is a 5-act structure right there.
And understanding the mechanics of drama helps you see that script more clearly.
It helps you see it. It makes you aware of the structure. And maybe, just maybe, if you understand the mechanism, it helps you realize that you can improvise, you can change the dialogue, you can subvert the plot, you can break the fourth wall and question the whole setup.
That brings me to our final provocative thought for today. And I want to connect this back to what we were saying about the absurdists in modern drama.
Go on.
We talked about how modern drama often suggests that character is just a construct, that there is no solid, unchanging soul or self underneath, just a series of actions, masks, and performances we put on for different audiences.
Right, and that identity is fluid, not fixed.
So if that's true, if we are just a collection of lines we've learned and masks we wear,
Yeah.
then is there even such a thing as an authentic self? Or are we just peeling off one mask only to find another mask underneath, all the way down, with nothing at the center?
And to take that one step further, building on what you're saying, if we are living in an absurd world, a world without an inherent script or a divine author to give us meaning, then is the person who takes life incredibly seriously, the one who's actually crazy. Maybe the only rational response to the human condition is the one that Beckett and the absurdists offer us. To stand by the tree, acknowledge the vast, terrifying silence of the universe, turn to the person next to you, and just laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all.
On that surprisingly cheerful note, thank you for diving deep with us into the world of drama.
It was a true pleasure.
Keep watching the performance. It's happening all around you. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.